Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Onlife Health's webinar series presented in conjunction with Health Trust's Slice of Life program. My name is Michael Detner, and for those of you who have joined us before for these webinars, you might recognize me, but I have a couple of guests today as well. My name is Michael Detner, like I said, and today's topic is healthier holiday cooking and eating. And before we begin, I just wanted to make a couple pointers about the webinar itself. First of all, the webinar is being presented in a listen-only mode. And what that means is that even though you can hear us, at least we hope you can hear us, we cannot hear you, but don't worry, that doesn't mean we're ignoring you or anything like that. The last 5 to 10 minutes of the webinar have been set aside for questions and answers. So even though we can't hear you, you may at any time during the webinar type questions in the question box, and that's the one by the orange arrow there in your control panel. And then at the end of the webinar, we'll attempt to answer as many of those questions as possible during that Q&A portion of the webinar. Please also note that this webinar is being recorded, so if you did want to go back and revisit it, or if you know of someone who couldn't make it or couldn't get signed in, please just let us let them know that they can use the link that was originally sent to retrieve the recording. So that being said, I'm very happy today to introduce our two presenters. The first, right here on my right, I'm not sure how that appears on the camera, but anyway, the first is Felicia Hazelgrove. She's been working here at Onlife Health since August of 2013. She is the clinical support specialist for nutrition and weight management for Onlife Health. Felicia has a bachelor's degree in human ecology, nutrition, and human ecology and nutrition from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, yes, Tennessee, and a master's in exercise and nutrition science from Lipscomb University. She's a registered dietitian and a certified exercise physiologist. She's a board member for the Nashville Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and she's a member of the Sports, Cardiovascular, and Wellness Nutrition Practice Group. I feel like I exercised just talking about all of your credentials. And not to be outdone, we have Dorothy Jurgensen here. Dorothy is Onlife's clinical support specialist for behavioral health, and she's been with us since October of 2016. Dorothy has a bachelor's in social work from Taylor University and a master's in agency counseling from Indiana State University. Her career has included such jobs as working as an outpatient mental health counselor, an emergency officer, specializing in mental health diagnostics and bereavement, mental health diagnostics. Also a bereavement volunteer, and she has also worked with the suicide hotline as and as a hospital social worker. So I can read, I promise. So need to click on a button here. Looks like the webinar is full. Okay, so moving on. The agenda for today, we're going to sort of do it in three parts. The first being, Felicia will be talking to us about healthier holiday nutrition from the point of view of a registered dietitian. There we go. And then Dorothy will talk about holiday stress and eating. I think we all know that stress and eating sort of go hand in hand, maybe way too often. And Dorothy will talk about that from a behavioral health expert's point of view. And then, as I said, we'll go ahead and leave some time for tips and suggestions and your questions and comments and answers and so forth. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and move on to Felicia. And I just wanted to start with a question. As a nutritionist, as a dietitian, what do you see as some of the main issues that people deal with when it comes to cooking and eating that they might not deal with so much in other parts of the year?
Mm-hmm. So the holidays, as I'm sure we've all experienced, they're typically a time of excess. We have a lot of food, a lot of choices of the foods that we can be eating. It's also a time where there are more, you feel more okay with being over full or getting to that point where you have to unbutton your pants, you're so full, or maybe take a nap. So it can be challenging, especially when, holiday treats are coming out, and maybe that's something you only see once a year, so you want to eat as much of it as you can.
Mm-hmm.
So those things can certainly make it a little more challenging.
Right. Yeah, and there are physical consequences, obviously short-term physical consequences. It's just not really good for you physically to overeat. Are there more long-term studies or more long-term consequences for sort of eating and gaining more weight during the holidays?
Absolutely. There's not, the research is mixed when it comes to the amount of weight that the average person gains during the holidays, but it's pretty clear that when you do gain weight during the holidays, you're more likely to keep it on rather than lose it. So holiday after holiday, year after year, that can equal a lot of weight and a lot of health consequences.
Mm-hmm. And does metabolism slow down the older we get? Does that play a part in making it harder to lose those holiday pounds?
Absolutely. The older we get, the less calories our body needs. So it does make it challenging. On that note, if you continue to eat the same amount of food throughout your entire life, even if you weren't overeating during the holidays, if your metabolism is slowing down, you're going to see weight gain.
Right. So that's something to definitely keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have three. I'm sure you probably could have 100 tips for us, but you have three important things that you wanted to discuss today. And the first would be?
Yeah, fruits and vegetables. So I just want to point out first that, although it can be challenging, it absolutely is possible to prevent weight gain during the holidays, and hopefully these 3 tips will help. The first one is eat more fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables, as I'm sure you're aware, they really are powerhouse foods. They are packed full of lots of nutrition, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, fiber. Mm-hmm. They have known health benefits, and they are naturally lower in calories. So that's really good, for your health, but also your weight. Definitely helpful when we're trying to prevent weight gain. I did bring a little visual. Hopefully you can see this. But this is just the My Plate model from choosemyplate.gov. There are fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy within the model. And an easy tip for your fruits and vegetables is to make them half of your plate. So half of your plate should be fruits and vegetables. That's a really good starting point when you're filling your plate at a meal.
Right. At any meal, not necessarily just
at any meal, but especially during the holidays. And I know we talked a little bit about it earlier. It can be hard to include those fruits and vegetables in traditional holiday meals. So I challenge you to try to include them in foods that maybe you're already making, like stuffing. Mm-hmm. I loved hearing about one of your favorite stuffing recipes. I was talking about, if your traditional stuffing, chop up some apples. That's a quick and easy way to add fruit to something you're already eating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the recipe she was referring to, I learned a few years ago to include, in addition to celery, apples, like tart green apples, mm-hmm. And sour cherries or dried cranberries mm-hmm. in stuffing. And at first people thought, well, that just sounds bizarre. It's the only stuffing I'll ever make anymore. It's absolutely delicious, and it's got, guess what, fruits and vegetables in it. Yeah. Because I don't want to eat an orange at Christmas time or the holidays. Right. I want something that I'm going to really, really enjoy eating.
And that sounds like a great flavor combination too. But the cranberries, pomegranates, kale, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, those are all seasonal fruits and vegetables mm-hmm. that we can get fresh this time of year, which is wonderful. Plus, they're really colorful. They add a lot of vibrancy to your plate, red, orange, green. So they make your plate more visually appealing, and that's going to also help you to feel more satisfied with your meal.
Right. And as they say, you eat with your eyes
mm-hmm. Absolutely.
First. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Felicia's tip number 2, fats. Healthier fats.
So I'm sure you've at one point in time been told, you should eat less fat, and that's going to be good for your health. It's good for your weight, but that's not necessarily true. There's 2 types of fats. Those that are a little less healthy, your saturated fats, like the ones shown in the picture you've got up, where there's, chicken or maybe turkey, some sort of casserole, breads. And those foods typically have a lot of those saturated fats, the ones that are a little less healthy. Those fats are typically found solid at room temperature, like butter. They're also found in animal products as well, and especially in that skin that you have on turkey.
And there's some skin there. White meat or dark meat?
Well, there's going to be a little more fat in dark meat. From a personal preference, I'll tell you that I love dark meat. And it's a little more moist. It's a great source of iron. But if you're using the MyPlate model and you make a quarter of your plate protein. So rather than making the protein the star of your meal, keep those fruits and veggies as the star, make your protein just 1/4 of the plate. You can easily incorporate protein of all types into your meal. Now, it is a better choice if instead of maybe frying your turkey, to grill, bake, or broil and take off the skin. But you can absolutely include it, and that can help you to eat less of that saturated or less healthy fat.
A recipe that I tried to find that my mother used to make when I was growing up, she wouldn't roast a turkey. She would actually buy just a turkey breast, and she would cook it on top of the stove, like very, very slowly. And it was phenomenal. And the skin has to come off because it doesn't get brown. It's kind of unappetizing anyway. So it was white meat. And so that's something, if I would encourage anybody listening, if you can find it online, a way to cook a turkey breast on the stove. It's really delicious. I couldn't find it.
Yeah, and that sounds like a great way to keep the moisture in there so that you don't end up with a dry turkey that's not very appetizing.
Right. And there are also good fats.
There's also good fats. So,
as they say,
fats are an important part of the way that our body functions and processes. But it's important to choose those healthy fats. You can find them liquid at room temperature, like olive oil. They're also found in plant foods like nuts and seeds, and even in seafood as well. So, if you're open to an alternative to the holidays, you could even do maybe a nice salmon instead of a turkey. That'd be a great way to incorporate some of those healthy fats. You could add nuts to your stuffing. Another place where you're going to find a lot of fat during the holidays is the desserts and sides, or some of those casseroles. So if you can swap those out for a healthier fat or just less, if you're using the saturated fat, it's going to be a better choice. So some examples of doing that, you could use Greek yogurt, non-fat Greek yogurt, instead of sour cream in a dip. Sweet and savory makes a great base. If you're baking, you can actually use unsweetened applesauce, non-fat Greek yogurt, nut butters, and avocado in place of some of the butter as well.
Someone brought to work one day an avocado-based chocolate pudding. I think it was fabulous. It was so good.
It makes a really creamy base for things like that, or even in like a frosting as well. It makes a really creamy base.
Right. So and it's a healthy fat. Now I think sometimes people get confused. I know it took me a while to wrap my mind around that. If I get rid of all of the unhealthy fats in my house and start concentrating on just healthy fats like olive oil and nuts and fish and so forth, it's going to be better for me, which is true. What I didn't realize was the calorie content of fat is really just pretty much the same, even if it's a good fat.
It is.
You seem so disappointed.
I know. Compared to carbohydrates and protein, where you're also going to get calories, fat contains more calories per gram than the others. So a little bit really goes a long way. If you're swapping them out, I would recommend swapping out the less healthy fats for the healthy fats, but not necessarily increasing the amount of healthy fats that you're doing, because we do want balance. We want to get the fruits and the veggies, we want the grains and the protein. So we want it all there, and we really want balance. Right.
And we should probably mention once again that this diagram, I know you might be able to see it very well. This diagram can be found at choosemyplate.com. health.gov. So check that out. Also, I noticed that's a partitioned plate.
Yes,
you can buy plates that actually have partitions on them like this, and I think it would be good if you're watching your holiday food intake and so forth. Might also be a good way to teach kids how to portion their portions as well.
Absolutely. So those are the plates that, it's a circle, but the one section, it's that big section, that's probably where you normally put your turkey, and then two other smaller sections. So rather than putting your entree or your protein in that big section, put your fruits and veggies there and use the smaller sections for your grains and your protein.
Great advice. Great advice. Tip number 3, sugar.
Yeah, so reduce added sugar. So sugar is the foods that you're going to find them in, they're really concentrated sources of calories. So sodas, desserts like cakes and cookies, pie, there's a lot of sugar in all of those foods and a lot of calories too. So the American Heart Association recommends that women eat less than 6 teaspoons or 100 calories of sugar a day, and men eat no more than 9 teaspoons or 150 calories per day. And those teaspoons add up very, very quickly.
Right. And a teaspoon is not a lot.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. And if you're looking at a nutrition facts label, when you look at the line that says added sugar, 4 grams is equal to 1 teaspoon.
Wow.
And we were talking about this earlier. 1 can of soda is over that limit for both men and women. So it's really easy for that sugar to add up.
And there's been a lot of publicity lately about really how downright dangerous drinking a lot of soda regularly can be because of that sugar content, which is enormous.
Absolutely. It's extra calories that our body doesn't need. You're not going to get a whole lot of nutrition out of sugar, but it can certainly be there. But when we're eating it in excess, it's not doing our body any good.
Right. And there are ways to sweeten things that are in many cases natural with less or sometimes 0 calories. Right.
Yeah.
And specifically, one thing that Dorothy brought up when we were planning this was the use of monk fruit, which you use a lot. I hadn't heard of it until I think yesterday, and it's fascinating. So if you wouldn't mind, Dorothy, tell us a little bit about your experience with using monk fruit.
Oh, I'd love to. Every recipe that calls for sugar, I substitute it for monk fruit. It's made from a natural plant, and I like natural things. 0 calories. It doesn't raise your blood sugar, so I feel it's a much healthier option. And you can use a one-on-one substitution. It's family tested, grandkid tested. They don't know the difference and love it. So one interesting quick tip. The only difference I find is it doesn't always dissolve quite as quickly as sugar does, or as completely. So I've invested in a very inexpensive coffee grinder.
Oh.
And if your recipe calls for powdered sugar, I put my monk fruit in the coffee grinder, grind it for a few seconds, and it's as smooth as can be. So it's a great substitution.
So it's used like sugar, and it's available. Do you have to go to?
I get mine online.
Exotic food
I get mine
stores?
online, but because it's easy, and oftentimes in the grocery store they might have other added ingredients that I'm not so sure about. So I get it online, and often they will mix it with erythritol, which Felicia may talk about, and I find that okay too as a natural substitution with 0 calories.
I think we just made a segue.
There you go.
Yeah, so
To erythritol. Now this sounds like this just sounds like a dangerous chemical to me.
Yeah,
Erythritol.
It's just a sugar alcohol, and you can use it similar to the monk fruit, cup for cup, for sugar. So it's just another way to eat less sugar for if you're going to be baking, or maybe you're sweetening your tea. There's just some other alternatives that you can use without adding the calories and causing those blood sugar spikes.
So low calorie or no calorie?
This one is no calorie.
No calories at all. So you don't have to have tons of calories to have tons of flavor. In other words. So that's erythritol, and that's available in supermarkets?
You should be able to find it there. It's probably a little bit easier if you buy it online, but you should be able to find it.
Which has become a lot easier.
Yes,
also.
online shopping, absolutely. Sucralose, you're probably a little more familiar with this one. It's those yellow packets like Splenda. This is just the this is not, Splenda is the brand name, but this is what it is. And it's similar to sugar, some of the components in sugar. It has a similar structural makeup. But this one's artificially made. It is I would say a lot less expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is a factor, this may be a good option. They're all absolutely safe to use. And there are other alternatives as well. But these ones tend to work pretty well for baking, which I know we tend to do a lot of
mm-hmm.
during the holidays. And just another tip as well, a few more tips in terms of cutting back on added sugars. If you're not the one doing the baking, but you want to enjoy sweets, eat less. Maybe share your desserts with a friend, mm-hmm. or go for the fruit, something that's naturally sweetened as well.
That also reminded me a bit. I know I've heard, and you can tell me if this is right or wrong, that if you're going to enjoy a full dessert at the holidays, pumpkin pie is not the worst thing in the world. I've heard it's full of fiber. Well, compared to cake, I suppose.
I would say that's a tricky question because not every pumpkin pie is going to be made the same.
Right. It's a tricky question that I just threw at her out of the blue. We didn't practice this. I'm sorry.
No, but that's okay. So pumpkin pie, I mean, there's a lot of sugar in pumpkin pie. Even though there is pumpkin,
monk fruit pumpkin pie.
There's a lot of sugar.
That's what I make mine with.
and then you also have to think about the crust. So the crust is often made with saturated fats. So everything in moderation is absolutely okay. But I don't know. It would be hard to pick out one specific dessert item and say this one is healthier over the others. If I had to do that, I would say choose the fruit, and that's probably not the answer you want.
Pumpkin's a fruit, right? Anyway, let's see. Wait, half here. Did you anything else? You said you had other tips to add before we.
That's what I had. I added them in. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, good. We'll come back to you in just a minute. Well, we're going to turn to Dorothy now, and like I said, she's her expertise is in behavioral health, similar to mine. And I wanted to throw one question out there to you. It's often said that food and emotions are very, very closely intertwined. And I think we all know that on some level. What are your thoughts about that, especially when it comes to this topic of holiday eating and cooking?
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on that, and thank you for asking. Have you ever had the experience, Michael, if you go on vacation and you eat more than the usual amount of calories, but you stay the same weight or even lose weight?
When I was younger.
Approximately 1 in 5 people have experienced that. Or maybe you're on a calorie-restricted diet and you gain weight. So no discussion of weight gain is really complete without talking about the stress component.
Very good. Well, just like with Felicia, Dorothy has 3 tips that she's going to give as far as sort of not just getting through the holiday eating portion, but getting through the holidays in general, because holidays can be pretty stressful, as we all know. So your first is focus on your own stress. What do we mean by that?
Absolutely. It's just like being on an airplane where the stewardess comes along and says, put on your own oxygen mask first before helping your neighbor. Take care of yourself. And this is so important.
But isn't that selfish?
High stress times. When you are at your best, you'll be your best at helping others.
Exactly.
So take care of yourself. First and foremost, get your rest. Sleep is so important. When we don't get enough of it, we are not as resilient and are able to handle stress as well.
Right.
We also tend to overeat when we're tired. So get your rest. And another practice that is so important to our health is gratitude. Every day, think of what you are grateful for. Maybe it's that you got out of bed and you can breathe on your own. Be grateful for it. Maybe write it down to remind yourself. But practice this every day. Sometimes we have to really turn the channel on our brains to something more positive and nurture those positive emotions.
Right.
So
it always reminds me how habitual our thinking can be. If we get into the habit of looking at the negative things in our lives rather than the positive, that habit can be hard to break. You've really got to, at least initially, put some effort into to looking at things not through a lens of, how miserable is this, what a rotten day, but to be able to, like you said, my heart's beating, that's a good start. You know, I'm thankful for that. And that attitude of gratitude, as they call it.
Yeah.
There is an enormous amount of research out there that I found that people who habitually practice gratitude, looking at things through a positive lens, so to speak, their physical health immediately improves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're right. We do have to nurture it. We do have to pay attention because by nature, we tend to look at things negatively.
Right.
So practice the gratitude. And, you know, everybody's different, Michael, with what kind of things help them relax. I think it's important that you take a look into, ask yourself the question, what do I do that helps me calm down and relax? Maybe it's exercise, maybe it's music, maybe it's reading a book, maybe it's working a puzzle, but whatever it is for you, that's what you should practice every day. Then, of course, there's so many wonderful stress reduction techniques that I love to talk about. Two of my favorite are mindfulness and meditation. Everybody can do them every day, and it's free. So they're just wonderful examples. Mindfulness, we can do this any time of day, wherever we are, making our bed, brushing our teeth, driving in the car, eating, absolutely. Driving in the car, we can pay attention to the cars around us and our surroundings rather than blindly driving and wondering how you got there. Be mindful of the here and now. You know, when you spend time, your thoughts go back to the past. We think about all those mistakes that were made and all the bad things that happen, and we tend to get very depressed. When our mind takes us to the future and the things we have to accomplish and get done, we get very anxious. So to avoid both depression and anxiety, keep your mind right at what's in front of you, the here and the now, and focus intently on that, whether it's your food or whatever you're doing.
Right. You mentioned earlier today or yesterday that the idea that we sort of have two states. We have a state of anxiety or stress and a state of relaxation.
Absolutely.
And talk a little more about that.
Okay, definitely. So basically our body is going to function from one of two states, relaxed state or stress mode. We've got two modes. So basically when you're under high stress, and this goes back to the digestion component, when you're under high stress, the primitive part of your brain thinks you're going to be eaten by a man-eating tiger and your digestion will shut down. So a very quick way to remedy that is to take some deep breaths. So before you eat every meal, take some deep breaths in, hold it, release it before every meal to get oxygen in your system. And it takes about 1 minute to get your body over to functioning in relaxation mode. So another important aspect of oxygen is that we have to have it to digest our food.
Right.
So we have these little intestinal villi, little finger-like structures that pull the oxygen out of our bloodstream. So we can help that along by, during a meal, sit up straight, taking some deep breaths, bringing that oxygen, and it helps so much in the whole digestive process.
Slouching on the sofa, eating from a TV tray, watching TV, that's physically bad for us because you can't, first of all, slouching, you can't fill your lungs that way.
Yeah.
And I never realized until we had talked about this, the importance of oxygen in digestion.
Absolutely.
And also in stress management.
Yeah. We can't live, they say we can live 4 weeks without food, 4 days without water, but only 4 minutes without oxygen.
Exactly.
Pretty darn important.
We should all take a breath right now. Okay. So, Dorothy's tip number 2. Prioritize your relationships. Relationships can be wonderful things and sometimes not so wonderful things during the holiday. What do you mean by prioritize your relationships?
Absolutely. Well, I like to think of the Rosetta effect.
The Rosetta?
The Rosetta effect. Rosetta is a little town in north Pennsylvania. And in 1961, there were 2 cardiologists sitting around having a beer, and they thought, why is there no heart disease in the town of Rosetta? It's rampant across the rest of the country. What are they doing that's so different? So they decided to do a 50-year study following the population of Rosetta, and what they found was kind of shocking. What they discovered was that these people worked in quarries. They were exposed to dusts and a lot of things that aren't so good for us. They smoked a lot of cigars, drank a lot, ate a lot of sausages and cheese, and
I want to live in this, Adam.
and cooked with lard. So that was not what they expected to find. But what they also found was that it was a close-knit Italian community where multi-generational families lived together, 2 or 3 generations under one roof. If you got sick, there was always somebody there to take care of you. If you had a hole in your roof, the neighbor came over and took care of it. You never worried about being alone or being taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
So what they took from this study is not that we should drink a lot of alcohol, smoke, and eat lard. What they discovered was that there's a protective value of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So nurture your relationships. At holiday time, if you're enjoying your family, if your friends, get up from the dessert table and go play a game together, play charades, sing around the piano, nurture those relationships. And a word to those people who don't like being around their family. Seek out someone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that all of us know someone, we may not be aware of it, but we know someone who's going to spend Thanksgiving alone. So reach out to them and ask them to have dinner with you. And if you can't do that, volunteer at a food pantry or a homeless shelter.
And that actually brings up something that a sneak preview of the next quarterly webinar, the idea of doing things, giving of yourself for no reason other than to do it, not expecting anything in return. Volunteering, for instance, it's also known as altruism. The amount of research that's out there about people, the health of people who give just for the sake of giving is astounding.
Yeah.
So much so that we're going to do a webinar about it.
Yeah,
pretty soon.
That's great. I look forward to that. The caveat is do it for the sake of giving, not for what you get in return. And it is good for our health.
Exactly.
So thank you.
Exactly. And I was also thinking there are people who may want to be with their family at the holidays, and geographically they can't get there, whatever reason. One thing that I've experienced, because my family is far away, is Friendsgiving, and it's one of my most favorite times of the year to just be with people, with my family of choice. Doesn't always have to be the family of origin. Sometimes you can mix them up.
Absolutely.
But prioritizing the relationships in your life.
Absolutely. So important.
Very important. Tip number 3, we're back to the word mindful.
Yes.
Mindful food choices. What do we mean by that?
Oh, lots of tips for that. Be mindful. Pay attention to what you're eating. So my number 1 tip is to drink water. So our bodies are made up of 70% water. And if we get just a little bit dehydrated, our brain interprets that as hunger, and we're going to eat more. Another tip is be mindful of your alcohol consumption.
Mm-hmm.
It's a season for drinking and being merry, and we often like to let loose and just have a good time, but then wonder why the next day we are down in the dumps and not feeling so well. It's because alcohol is a depressant.
Exactly.
So the other thing alcohol does, it lowers our inhibitions.
Mm-hmm.
If we drink on an empty stomach, we're more likely going to eat more.
Right.
And it blocks leptin, which is our hunger hormone that helps us feel satisfied and full. We don't get to that as easily. So eat before you have your alcohol, and then enjoy a drink or two.
It's interesting you brought up leptin. There are 2, I learned recently, there are 2 hormones, leptin and ghrelin. Leptin, when you've eaten and you feel full and you know that it's time to quit eating, that's because that hormone leptin told you that.
Exactly.
Ghrelin, on the other hand, tells you, I learned this, you can remember ghrelin because your stomach's growling.
That's right.
Ghrelin is the hormone that tells you when it's time to eat.
Exactly.
Alcohol can definitely mess with those 2 hormones, and also a lot of research on sleep and its effect on the way the body handles ghrelin and leptin. That's why when you, as you said earlier, losing a lot of sleep deprivation can cause you to overeat because your brain doesn't quite know what it's supposed to do. So I'm glad you brought up leptin and ghrelin.
Pharmaceuticals thought they had found gold when they discovered this.
Yeah.
And they thought if we just feed more people leptin, that's going to take care of their weight problems. And they did this, and what they discovered was we don't have a lack of leptin, but we have a lack of absorbing it, and stress will keep us from doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, so very important.
Good to know.
Yeah.
So,
So two other things I like to talk about that people don't always think about, but that are so important, is that we need to slow down and we need to breathe.
mhm.
We covered the breathing aspect already
Mhm.
about how important that is, but the slowing down aspect of it, we don't think of this often enough, I think. Researchers tell us that 30 to 40% of the digestion process is due to our paying attention to what we're eating.
Really?
So in other words, if we're eating on the run or eating while we're working or engrossed in a movie, thinking about other things, basically not paying attention, then our metabolism is working at 60 to 70% efficiency.
That's a D to an F on a grading scale.
Exactly. And our brain interprets this lack of information as hunger.
Mhm.
We're going to eat more.
Yep.
Interesting study with a couple of rats that I like. I think it demonstrates this. There were two groups of rats, and the researchers took one group and destroyed the part of their brain that controlled their taste. And so both groups of rats ate the same kind of food, the same amounts of food. They got the same level of little rat respect that good researchers are going to give.
Mhm.
And what they discovered was that the group who could not taste started dying. And
I think I would too.
they did an autopsy to figure out why. They were all malnourished. They were starving to death, even though they had eaten the same amount of food.
Just the experience of tasting the food.
The pleasure is gone, and it impacted them greatly in a detrimental way. So when we enjoy the holiday goodies with those great ingredients that Felicia talked about, there's no need to feel guilt. Enjoy your food. Savor every bite. Research tells us we'll end up eating less when we focus in on our food and really enjoy it.
And that's also known as mindful eating.
Absolutely. To take that another step, not only do you want to enjoy, be mindful of your food, what does it taste like? What does it feel like? What does it smell like? But also be mindful of your thoughts and your emotions. Am I bored? Am I depressed? Am I going to the refrigerator because I'm lonely? Why am I eating right now? Or am I just really hungry? What does that feel like?
Right.
So be mindful of all those things.
Right. And again, when we are so distracted with thoughts about what's to come, often that causes anxiety. Things that have happened that we feel bad about can cause depression. It again leaves you with nothing. What happens to the here and now? It loses its meaning, and that's really where that's all we have.
Exactly.
Really. We don't have the future. We don't have the past anymore.
That's right.
Right. So and that can be done. We have. I think if some of you have been with us for a while back, we had a webinar, I believe, about mindfulness, and Anna, one of our staff here at Onlife Health, she talked about that quite a bit. And one thing that she talked about, maybe in a different context, was mindful eating. And she had everyone in the room take a raisin, and she said, we're going to experience this raisin before we eat it. Instead of popping it in our mouths, we had to listen to it. And we had to smell it, and then we could put it in our mouths, but we couldn't just eat it. We had to see what it felt like, and then bite it and see that. So we spent probably a good, I don't know if either of you have done this exercise. We probably spent 5 or 10 minutes with one raisin. That might be a little over the top. I don't think anybody could really survive eating like that, but it really did show how much we're missing while we're watching the news. So
yeah, that's great. I love that, and the raisin is a great example. But you can do that with any activity. When you're making your bed, feel the cotton sheets. What does it feel like? Look at the colors and the textures, and notice everything about it instead of what you're getting ready to wear.
Exactly.
Notice what you're doing, whether that's eating, anything. So those are great mindfulness practices. Did we talk about meditation at all?
We talked about mindfulness a little bit. Mindfulness is a big kind of buzzword now, and it seems like it's sort of a new thing. It's been around the concept of mindfulness has been around for a long, long time.
Thousands of years. And
yes.
yet research in the last 10 years has exponentially exploded on it. So we know how good this is for us. And mindfulness is a form of meditation.
Right.
Many, many, many types of meditation. None of them are bad. So do whatever you enjoy doing, and that's great. But meditation is so fascinating because we know that it physiologically changes our brain. When people that meditate, they look at their brain structure and they find that their amygdalas are the part that causes the fight or flight shrinks up a little bit. And the prefrontal cortex, where we are calm and we make rational decisions and we show empathy, that gets stronger and bigger by meditating. Who would have thought? So we know that this works. And it just makes me so sad when people say, I can't meditate because I can't stop my brain from thinking.
Yeah, I've experienced that.
It's not a necessity.
Yeah.
So what I like to think of with meditating is that we take an easy approach and we accept everything as it comes into your brain. And we can't stop our thoughts from happening, and they're going to be all over the place. But that's okay. Just notice it. Say, that's interesting that I'm thinking about that argument yesterday. Oh, that's interesting. Now I'm thinking about what I'm going to wear today. Oh, and then come back to a word or a sound. For me, it's aham. And I do this silently to myself, noticing all those thoughts, thinking that's interesting, but accepting them.
Right.
What happens is as we practice that, it carries over into the rest of our life without us sometimes even knowing it. I like to think of the husband and wife who were at dinner one time and had an argument. And after a few minutes, they were talking about something else. And the husband said, if we would have argued about that a month or so ago, you would have stomped up from the table and been not spoken for a couple of days. And now we went on to something else. What's up with that? Is that meditation thing you're doing? And she thought, oh, I guess it is.
Not medication.
No,
meditation.
Thank you. Big difference. But again, as we practice accepting the thoughts, it's easier outside of our meditation practice to accept what's going on around us without getting so stressed out and upset.
Which will lead to overeating, which will lead to weight gain, which will lead to ultimately miserable holidays, if you think about it. Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. It's fascinating. I wish we had more time. I know we're coming up on our question and answer time. So I did want to, first of all, I want to check really quickly, and I have to get up from my chair to do this, to see what we might have in the way of feedback or questions from our audience, if I can. It's never a webinar without a technical glitch. That's just the way it works. Here we go. Let's see. See if we got some questions here. Not seeing any yet. Okay. Okay. If you have any questions or comments, here we go. I think I see some now. I wish it was easier to see them because they're all. Oh, someone says, I thought that sucralose was not good for you.
I would say that's not true. It's FDA approved. There is a limit that you wouldn't want to eat more than that. But it's a pretty large amount, and it would be pretty difficult for someone to achieve that. But yeah, if you prefer a more natural sugar alternative, I would say maybe go for the monk fruit.
Yeah, I'm so glad to have found out about monk fruit. Let's see what else we might have here. Or stevia. Right?
Stevia is another natural alternative as well.
And stevia is from a plant, correct?
It is. Stevia is 300 times more sweet than sugar, so that's why I don't use it for baking so much. It is not a one-on-one substitution. I found that out with my first pumpkin pie I threw out.
And that can make it really tricky when you're baking if it's not one-to-one. You have to do a lot of math.
It is, but it's great to put a drop, just a drop in your tea or coffee. It's great for that.
Right. Any other questions? For some reason, this is very difficult to read. Oh, here's a question. Why isn't this popping out? I apologize. Again, it's not a webinar without a technical glitch of some sort. This is where I wish I had a producer or director. Here's the question. I think I see it now. How long do you meditate before you start seeing the benefits? Meaning, if you meditate every day for 2 weeks, is that when you might start seeing a difference?
Oh, great question. Different types of meditation we know take different amounts of time to see the difference. So there are some that produce very, very quick results. A gratitude meditation practice that Michael's going to talk about later is definitely one of the quickest. And as little in as 2 or 3 days, we can see the benefits of this and differences in how we feel. So good question.
Okay, let's see. One thing that I have learned about meditation and mindfulness in particular is that it's often referred to as a practice. Doing have you done your practice today? And it takes a while to get to the point where stress is really causing health problems. It takes a little while to deliberately go back and start untying those knots as well.
Yeah.
So I think regularity is good, but if you skip it one day, don't freak out about it. Just call it what it is and get back on the bicycle and ride, so to speak.
You know, it is a practice, and that's a great point, Michael. And obviously, the more we do it, the more results we're going to get. But I like to think of it as like taking a shower. When we take a shower, sometimes you have long, luxurious, wonderful showers and you're enjoying it. Sometimes it's quick and hurried and you don't feel so good about that practice, but you do it anyway so you don't smell bad the rest of the day.
Exactly.
So we meditate the same way to get the results afterwards in our daily life. And it's so important to do that. And as you adopt an easy approach where you're not so hard on yourself, it does become something like brushing your teeth that you don't want to miss, that you do automatically. And that's kind of the goal.
Exactly. Let's see. I saw another one about monk fruit. Where did it go? Oh, do you find that family? I think the question about monk fruit was, do you buy it whole or?
It comes in a little bag granulated, just like sugar.
It's in a powder form.
Yeah, I've never made my own. Yeah.
Do you find that family pressures? Do you find that family pressures you to eat like they do, less healthy, which is not how I would choose to eat during the holidays or not?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. You want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, and I think we both experienced this. My family in particular, food is very much a love language for them. I eat their food and that's their love. And it can be really challenging to tell someone, that you care about that you've had enough. But I would just suggest, if it's something that you enjoy, that you like, eat some of it and enjoy it. And be open to your family members, your friends, letting them know that you've had enough. You can also offer to bring something, maybe bring a healthy dish. That way there's going to be something that you're going to be more happy with. Maybe it fits your eating plan a little bit better.
Right. And I would add to that, Felicia, so many times when we're pressured to eat, we say, I'm just so fat, I don't want to. And then you get more pressure to eat. So try to think of a positive way to say, it was delicious. I really enjoyed it. And I'm feeling so good right now that I don't want to overeat. But thank you anyway.
I like this so much. I would like to take some home. Could I have a plastic bag, please?
That's a great one, too.
And that way it's free food. It's yeah, why not?
Yeah.
I think maybe I'm still in college. I don't know. Let's see. Great advice. How long do you meditate? I think we got. Oh, okay. Is organic stevia? Organic stevia in the raw. That's a brand. Is it safe to use as a substitute in tea, coffee, and etc.?
It would be safe just like regular stevia, but if if eating organic is important to you, then you can absolutely make that choice. If you don't mind the other, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. So if that's not as important to you, you can choose the regular stevia as well.
What are the ratios of monk fruit to a recipe?
I don't bake with it too at all. I've never actually used it in baking. Only really tried it recently. But from what I understand and from what Dorothy has told me about it, you can use it at a 1-to-1 ratio, cup for cup.
That's correct. They say it's 70% as sweet as sugar. I use it 1-to-1 because if you get too much of it, then to me it's just too sweet. Mm-hmm. So the 1-to-1 ratio seems to work out really well in my recipes.
Mm-hmm.
What does the group think about fasting?
Well, in terms of the holidays, I think a really good approach, and I think we were hoping to have some tips that maybe we didn't get to. But rather than going into the holiday fasting, I would suggest eating something ahead of time. If you are to the point where you feel like you're ravenous and absolutely starving, you're probably going to overeat. And if you've had something to eat ahead of time, if you have something in your belly, hopefully it's nutritious as well. You're not going to be as likely to overeat. It's going to be a little easier to make healthful choices, especially when there's a lot of foods to choose from.
And I think it's about 10 till, and we try to keep this a little bit shorter. And I think we just sort of got going and couldn't stop here. But I am aware that our time is actually trickling away here. But before we go, I did want to let everyone know that we have a holiday gift for you. At Onlife, we have compiled a PDF. I guess you could call it a cookbook, a cooking document with a whole bunch of different recipes that we thought would be perhaps useful things you could try during the holidays or at any time. There's lots of just healthy recipes in this collection, and we're going to send that via email to everyone who attended today, and also hopefully to everyone who, if people decided to watch the recording. So keep an eye on your email for our Onlife healthy foods recipe book. And like I said, any of those recipes would be great for any time of year. And I hope to be able to give you a glance at it, but unfortunately, we just don't really have time at this point. But watch your email. I do want to, first of all, give sincere thanks to Dorothy and Felicia. Thank you for sharing not just your knowledge, but the fact that you really do these things, and you're very passionate about the way you live and the way you pass it on to other people. So thank you both very much. Thank you to Health Trust, as always. We really love doing these webinars. I think it's been going on for 5 years or so now. That being said, I mentioned earlier the next webinar will be I believe the second Wednesday of February 2019, and the topic is a really, really interesting topic. It's about the health effects of giving back, about altruism that I talked earlier. We'll kind of get into that in some more detail. But most of all, thanks to all of you very much for participating in this again. We really, really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a wonderful holiday season and stay safe, and we will see you here hopefully in February. Take care.